channel Braintree District Council's committee. This channel has been set up to make sure that anyone can observe our democratic meetings. Please therefore remember that this meeting can be watched anywhere at any time by anyone with access to the internet. There is a delay between the meeting and the broadcast of approximately 30 seconds. Webcasting officer, please can you commence the broadcast and confirm, please?
Hi, Emma. Yeah, I can confirm that's off and running. Yep.
Thank you very much, Webcasting Officer. Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Planning Committee on Tuesday, the 2nd of June 2020. Before we commence the proceedings for this evening, I can confirm that the Council has adopted some basic etiquette rules for its remote meetings, and these are as follows. Please only speak when the Chairman invites you to do so. Members, please let the Chairman know that you wish to speak through the chat function. The Chairman will introduce speakers in the order that requests to speak have been made, unless a point of order has been made to which we will have to give way. Please minimise all distractions while you are in the meeting. Members are asked to mute their microphones when not speaking and to consider turning off your video to reduce interference on your audio feed. Please bear in mind that there may be a lag between speaking and other attendees hearing you, so please bear this in mind when you are speaking. Presentations, images, video footage should have been made available to you in advance of this meeting, but will be visible on the screens this evening. Please indicate by the chat function if there is a problem. When referring to officers' reports, please quote page numbers and paragraph numbers so that we can access them clearly. Members, we do not have any private item sessions for this business meeting this evening, so there will be no need for adjournments on that matter. If you do lose connection at any point and are unable to rejoin the meeting, please can you call the meeting facilitator, and we have provided you with contact details for doing that. Please only use the chat function for the purpose prescribed for requesting to speak or for a point of order. The chat function is subject to the access to information regimes such as Freedom of Information, EIR, but it's also subject to data protection, rules of defamation and the Council's Code of Conduct. For this meeting, members, for this meeting, we have officers in attendance, and you also have 2 meeting facilitators supporting this meeting, and there's also a minute taker. I can confirm that this meeting is quorate of the members of the Planning Committee. The Planning Committee consists of the following members: Councillor James Abbott, Councillor Kevin Bowers, Councillor Tom Cunningham, Councillor Patrick Horner, Councillor Hilton Johnson, Councillor David Mann, Councillor Andy Mundy, Councillor Mrs Ina Parker, Councillor Frankie Ritchie, Councillor Mrs Scattergood, Councillor Mrs Gabrielle Spray, Councillor Nick Unsworth, Councillor Justin Wrench. There are also planning officers in attendance this evening, and these are Chris Padgey, Planning Development Manager, Tim Habers, Principal Planner, Melanie Crobishley, Senior Planner, Lisa Page, Senior Planner. We have Alison Webb, who's clerk in this meeting. Jessica Mann will be reading the submitted statements for public question time, and myself, Emma Wisby and Kim Cole are the meeting facilitators. I will now hand over the meeting to Mrs Scattergood, Chairman of the Planning Committee. Thank you very much, Mrs Scattergood.
Thank you, Emma. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the meeting of this Planning Committee. My name is Councillor Wendy Scattergood, and I am chairing this meeting this evening. As you know, the Council is new to virtual meetings, so I'd ask everyone to be patient and understanding as we feel our way through this new way of working. I am being assisted by a governance officer and a meeting facilitator who will help me identify when people want to speak and manage the notifications through the chat line. I obviously can't see all of you, so please let me know using the chat function if there are any issues with your internet connection, and silence will be taken as assent during this meeting. I will now move on to the business of the meeting. Item 1, apologies of absence. I have no apologies for absence as we are all present. Item 2, declarations of interest. Does any member wish to declare the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interest, other pecuniary interest or non-pecuniary interest relating to items on the agenda, having regard to the Code of Conduct for members? I do have some people that wish to declare. Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to declare an NPI on the application in Part A, Item B at Jaspers Green. I have in the past advised objectors on what might be considered material planning issues, but I've not shared a personal opinion on this particular application, so propose to participate and vote.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. The next person wishing to declare an interest is Councillor Tom Cunningham. Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Could I declare two interests, please? First of all, on item E relating to the Discovery Centre at Great Notley. As a member of Great Notley Parish Council, who are mentioned in the report, I will remain and vote for that item. Also, an enhanced non-pecuniary interest in item F, relating to Block B Braintree Enterprise Centre. This planning application relates to the iConstruct project, which as Cabinet Member for Economic Development, I have spoken in favour of on a number of occasions in the past. So, Madam Chairman, at that moment, I will take my leave from the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. Councillor Abbott. You wish to...
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. Item 5C, 5C Garden Field. I know NPI in that I know Mr. MacDonald, who's a Silver End Parish Councillor who's made a representation, but also in the past I've made, when I wasn't on planning committee, representations about accesses for both for that development and the one opposite, but I come to this application afresh and have read the officer's report in full.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Could I declare a non-pecuniary interest, please, in Part A, Item E, of the application at the Discovery Centre in Great Notley Garden Village, as I'm Vice Chairman of Great Notley Parish Council mentioned in the report.
Thank you, Councillor. Does anyone else wish to make a declaration of interest? No? All right. Now I move on to item 3. There is an error in our agenda. The minutes of the 12th of May were approved at the last meeting, and the minutes of last week are not ready. We've only had 4 days, so it's been impossible to have them ready. They will come to the next meeting. That brings us on to item 4, public question time. We have no general planning questions this evening. The statements will be read before the items as they come up. That brings us on to item 5, planning applications. Members, we do have 3 items in Part B, but Councillor Abbott would like to speak on the part on number 190191 HH 41 Francis Way, Silver End. So we cannot unblock that at this time. He will have to speak on that when we come to that part. But we could unblock applications H and I, that is application 200090 full, 9 Jackman's Shelford, and 200091 full, 11 Jackman's. Would anyone like to move that we unblock those 2 items, please?
So move.
Councillor Cunningham, are you moving it?
Yes, happy to move, Madam Chairman.
Does it find a seconder?
It does, Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Those 2 items have been moved and seconded. We do have to put this to the vote. And I will go through the names of the vote. Councillor Abbott.
4.
Councillor Bowers.
4.
Councillor Cunningham.
4.
Councillor Horner.
4.
Councillor Johnson. Councillor Johnson.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Mann.
4.
Councillor Monday.
4.
Councillor Mrs. Parker.
4.
Councillor Ritchie.
4.
Councillor Mrs. Spray.
4.
Councillor Unsworth.
4.
Councillor Wrench.
4.
Thank you, members. Those two items have been approved. And for anyone that is watching this on the YouTube and is wondering what we're doing, these two items were brought to us because the parish council had put in an objection, but both of these items meet our planning policy and under normal circumstances would have been dealt with under delegated powers. So we have a right to approve them at this meeting. And I'll come back to items under Part A. And the first item under Part A is application 18020074. Land off the street, Gosfield. And I do have statements to be read on this application, and the statements are going to be read by Jessica. Jessica, could you start with the first statement, which is from Mr. Stephen Westover, who's an objector from 6 The Limes, Gosfield. Thank you.
Yes, good evening, Chairman. Good evening, members. I will now start the statement. Dear members, thank you for the opportunity to make a statement about this application. I am a local resident with particular interest in trees, countryside issues and nature conservation. I hold the professional diploma in arboriculture and have worked as a self-employed arboricultural consultant for the last 15 years, following 24 years as a local government tree officer. This application has improved greatly since it was first submitted, but still contains inconsistencies and omissions, which cause concern. Some of these were raised in my letter of 13th of April last year, which I assume is available to you. It should be possible to deal with most of these in suitable planning conditions, but I would like to draw your attention to my particular concerns. The items in bold are my suggestions for amendments to conditions 9, 12 and 13. The remainder is detailed information. 1. Condition 9. The arboricultural impact assessment continues to contain several omissions, the key ones of which I repeat below. However, to summarise, at Section 7 of the AIA recommends the preparation of an arboricultural method statement. This should be a requirement of any permission granted and specifically included in proposed condition 9. It does not record several large hawthorns growing close to the western boundary of the site, close to H41 and an important part of the screening of the site from the west. It suggests that this is an unmaintained field boundary. In fact, the field boundary is a low, regularly failed hedge, and all the effective vegetation in landscape terms is within the site of the proposed development and has not yet been recorded in any way in this report and application. It is suggested most strongly that these hawthorn and the 3 oaks, T42, T43 and T44, are protected by a TPO served as soon as possible. Any TPO should also include all the lime trees, although these are afforded some protection by being in the conservation area. A TPO would strengthen this. It does not include the large single stem lime close to the allotments. Whilst this may be growing within the allotment land, work on the proposed development site could affect it, and its presence should be recorded and identified as a constraint as required by BS 5837. This tree is part of the avenue and is a single stem specimen unaffected by the gale of 1987. As such, it is without doubt a Category A3 tree. Appendix 6 of the assessment recommends tree surgery work to 2 of the lime trees, T5 and T6, but Appendix 3, the survey sheets, contain preliminary management recommendations to T2, 4, 24 and 43. No reason is given for this work, which seems quite unnecessary. Paragraph 3.2 of the arboricultural report states that no specialised construction methods are required to mitigate the impact of this development on trees. However, the main access road crosses the RPA of T2 and private drives enter the RPAs of T2, T3 and T8. Excavations for surfacing curbs and services may all affect the root system as may compaction caused by vehicles. Some mitigation is essential, for example, suitable no-dig construction methods. These should be covered in an arboricultural method statement that should be specifically required by an amended condition 9. The arboricultural report suggests the planting of a single standard lime as a replacement for the 2 to be removed. Firstly, there is ample room for a second replacement in front of plots 3-4. Secondly, there is no indication of what species of lime should be considered. Neither Tilia eclora, T. cordata or T. tomentosa, nor any other exotic lime would be appropriate. The species and cultivar chosen should respect the species and form of the existing limes and should be a Tilia europea of a cultivar which is not golden foliaged or fastigiate. Proposed condition 12 requires that a biodiversity enhancement strategy be submitted and approved by the planning authority, but does not state at what stage this should be done. I would suggest that this plan should be submitted and agreed prior to the start of the development. Condition 13, open spaces management. The application proposes a significant area of open space, and the Section 106 agreement attached to the outline consent provides for a financial contribution towards upkeep. An earlier application for outline consent hinted at the formation of a management company, but there is still no indication of how this land is to be managed or how the management is to be paid for. Will it be a service charge on the new properties, or will the Gosfield Parish Council be expected to pay? This is covered in proposed condition 13, but the submission and agreement of the landscape and ecological management plan is not required until prior to the occupation of the development. Given the importance of the landscape and open space element of this scheme, I would suggest that this plan should be submitted and approved prior to the start of the development. Yours sincerely, Stephen Westover. And Chairman, that is the end of the statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you. We have one other statement on this same application, and this statement is from Miss Laura Dudley-Smith, who is the agent from Stratton Parker. Jessica, are you ready to read that one as well, please?
Yes, just bear with me one moment. There we go. Okay, statement from Laura Dudley-Smith, Stratton Parker. Thank you for the opportunity to submit this statement to be read to you this evening. I write on behalf of our client and applicant, Chelstein Homes. Chelstein Homes are a highly regarded local developer with a proven track record for delivery of high-quality schemes in Essex over the past 30 years. The proposals before you this evening are the result of a continuing liaison with the Council's planning officers since it was submitted some 18 months ago. This engagement has also been subject to extensive input from the Council's urban design, heritage, ecology and arboricultural consultants. We are pleased with the result of this joint working and are confident of the site's ability to quickly progress and deliver 17 new homes to support housing need in Gosfield and the surrounding area. You will be aware that the principle of development for this site was established through outline planning permission granted in February 2018. This full planning application therefore builds upon this fallback position to provide detailed proposals for the deliverable scheme. This outline permission also confirmed the acceptability of an access from the street for up to 19 units. Your officers have provided a very detailed report, which includes an assessment of planning balance. The assessment concludes that the benefits of the proposal would outweigh any harm, particularly in light of the current lack of a 5-year housing land supply, which weighs in favour of the development. In addition, the requirements of the statutory consultees have been met or addressed, and no further objections have been raised. Close working with the Council has led to a truly bespoke scheme, with house types being directly informed by the character and features of existing properties in Gosfield. Materials and boundary treatments have been carefully chosen, with the principal streetscape facing the limes having received particular attention given its important role in linking the development with the historic core of Gosfield. The siting of 10-year blind affordable housing units along this access road will also ensure the integration of these homes. The site layout seeks to enhance the contribution of the prolific avenue of historic lime trees to the conservation area, and a new area of open space will ensure their enjoyment by the public. All built form is situated outside of the root protection areas of these important trees to protect them from any harm. A Section 106 agreement has been agreed with the Council and includes a commitment to the provision of 6 affordable homes and a financial open space contribution on top of the extensive areas of open space being provided within the scheme. Land is also to be reserved as a wildlife corridor along the western boundary of the site. We do hope that you will therefore be able to agree with your officer's recommendation set out on page 26 of the report. Thank you very much for your time. And Chairman, that is the end of the statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. And I would like to thank Mr. Westover and Ms. Laura Dudley-Smith for submitting their statements to be read in this way. Thank you. We now come to the presentation, and the presentation is going to be made by Mel. Thank you, Mel.
Good evening, members. I will now share my screen with the first page of the presentation. I understand there can be a delay, so I will hopefully not speak too quickly, but please let me know if I need to slow down. So the site, one of the first site that we're looking at this evening is a piece of land off of the street in Gosfield to the southern edge of the village. Slide 2 that should appear on your screen shows the site outlined in red. You can see the street running to the right-hand side, and on the top of the site to the north is a road called the Limes. To the west of the site is open countryside. To the south of the site there is some allotment gardens and then open countryside. If you follow where my cursor is at the moment, that's roughly the line of where the conservation area runs within Gosfield, and so the top portion of the site does lie within the conservation area. Moving on to slide 3, this shows the block plan for the proposed development. As referred to in Miss Dudley Smith's statement, there's been a significant amount of work been completed on this site, both by the applicant, myself, and my officers here, the landscape team, and our urban designer, to achieve the development that you see before you. It's quite significantly different from the original form, if you've had an opportunity to look at what originally came in a couple of years ago. So at the top portion of the site, you can see remains clear of development. These are the two lines, the former avenue of lime trees. So the only built form, if any, that runs near those trees is the access road that then runs south to the majority of the site, and then terminates with an area of open space that contains the SUDS feature. And then along the western boundary of the site, we have an ecological corridor, which will be fenced off and forms part of the part of the land that will be managed for enhancement and biodiversity reasons. Oh. Moving on to slide 4. These 3 pictures show street scenes throughout the site. So the top one is the houses that would lie to the south of the lime trees. And so these are the houses you would first see as you enter the site. So we have 2 pairs and then a fairly sizable gap, 2 detached houses, and then finally another pair of houses at the far end. Between the 2 detached houses is where the access road would run south to serve the remaining properties on the site. The 2 street scenes below that are the houses as they run in a southerly direction towards the SUDS feature at the bottom of the site. I think this slide demonstrates the variety of house types that we have worked keenly with the applicant to ensure that there is a variety and mix of housing design within the site that also then reflects the unique character both within the Limes and also the historic centre of Gosfield nearby. The next, there's a number of slides to follow which will show you the front elevations in more detail of some of these properties. So this is house type 6, which is one of the houses that lies within the site and only viewable from inside the site. Slide 6 shows house type 5. Again, this is internal to the site. The next two slides, 7 and 8, show the two different pairs of houses that will lie on the initial access road in from the street. And the design of these houses have been led to a certain extent by the simple designs of the houses within the limes themselves. So we've got two different styles. So the second style is shown on slide 8. This is a 3-bedroom, 6-person property. Turning to slide 9, this is another house type 1, that's located internally within the site along the road that runs in a southerly direction. On slide 10, again, this is another house type that lies within the site, type 2. On slide 11, there's two of these properties within the site, and these turn the corner, so to speak, between the main access road and the roadway that runs to the southern part of the site. So these two houses are identical on either side of that junction, and as you can see, they have an active side elevation with windows and detailing. The next two slides, 12 and 13, are the larger properties that are located to the southern end of the site, where the road curves away from each other and they overlook the suds feature at the bottom of the site. And that's slide 13, again, house type 4A, one of the larger properties on the site. The next few slides will be photographs, both outside the site and within the site. So slide 14 shows where the entrance from the street will be. And it's roughly in the position where the 5-bar gate is at the moment. Moving on to slide 15. These photographs are taken from the centre of Gosfield, looking towards the top corner of the site. So in the top photograph is here. You can just make out the lime trees. And then this is a much closer view from near where the bus stop is, that's opposite the Green Man. And again, this portion of the site, originally when the application came in, there was proposed to be a block of flats on here. That has now been removed, and all built form will lie on the beyond the second row of lime trees. Now, for some reason, this hasn't got a number on it. I thought I'd done them all. Anyway, this is slide 16. These show you pictures within the site of some of the existing lime trees which are to be retained. As you can see, the date of the photograph, it was taken in winter, so they're not in leaf. Slide 17 is a view across the site towards the southern boundary, where there is a line of poplar trees, which you can just make out here. Again, not in leaf because of the time of year. Moving on to the next slide. Again, this is looking back towards the limes, the road to the north of the site. And again, some of the lime trees are located here, and you can just make out some properties within the limes in some of the gaps there. You can just make out actually to the western side of this photograph, the left-hand side, is the part of the ecological corridor that's going to be retained as part of the application. Slide 19 is again a view across the site. This is in an easterly direction towards the street, And this, you can see this end property here, and that's one of the properties that you can see on the street. And then the centre of the village is further along here. But again, you can make out some of the lime trees and just the edge of the poplar, the line of poplars to the south. Turning to slide 20. This is a view across the site to the north. I think possibly includes most of the lime trees. It's a sort of a wide angle shot, which shows most of the lime trees within that avenue. Again, not in leaf because of the time of year. This view on slide 21. You can just about make out the southern boundary of the site along the left-hand side of the photograph with the poplar trees. And where my cursor is at the moment is the portion of land that's going to be the ecological corridor that is referred to previously in Miss Laura's statement and also within the officer report. So slide 22 sets out the section 106 heads of terms. So we've got 6 affordable units, which will be 4 will come in the tenure of affordable rent, and 2 not shred ownership. Sorry about that. That should say shared ownership. And then we've got an open space contribution. And we've got the figure there because it's a fixed number of dwellings. We can calculate the figure, and that will go towards the provision of a new skate ramp within the recreation ground. And we've also got a section within on the amenity areas that's going to be created within the site. And I know one of the points that Mr. Westover made in, I think, his paragraph 3, which relates to the cost of maintaining the open space within the site. That will be the setting up of the management company, and the cost of the management of those pieces of land will fall to the owners of the properties, and there's no requirement for the parish council to be involved in that at all. So slide 23 sets out the summary and conclusion. So the site lies within the countryside, adjacent to the village boundary of Gosfield. Part of the site lies within the conservation area, and there are 2 listed buildings nearby. The development will provide 17 dwellings to all the housing supply, including 6 affordable units. Outline consent for up to 19 dwellings was granted on the 1st of February 2018. Officers are satisfied that the proposed layout and consider that the designs of the dwellings to be appropriate. Jobs will be provided during the construction phase, and future occupiers are likely to contribute to the vitality of the village. The scheme will retain the historic avenue of lime trees and will create an ecological corridor. The proposed development will therefore constitute sustainable development in the planning balance, and is therefore recommended that planning permission is granted. Following on from my conclusion, I just wanted to come back on a couple of the points that Mr. Westover made in his statement. So his first point is the request for an arboricultural method statement. So my recommendation will be to include that as an additional condition. Unfortunately, condition 9 can't be amended because the condition requires works to be carried out in accordance with an assessment. So I think it would be easier and simpler to actually have a separate brand new condition that requires the submission of the an ARB method statement prior to the commencement of works, and for that to be agreed before any work starts on site. There was a couple of other points that he made in terms of triggers. One was to do with condition 12 and also with condition 13. And I agree with him. I've also had discussions with the council's tree officer today, landscape officer, who also agrees that both of those conditions should have the trigger prior to commencement. One final point that the landscape officer just wanted to make is that we have had some plans submitted to us that clearly do show that the hedging and the trees along the western boundary of the site would be enclosed by a fence, so they would be suitably protected. My colleague Anna has been in touch with the parish council about protecting some of the trees on the site, but under the current circumstances that can't be done at the moment, but will be done as soon as possible when we're able to. That's the end of the presentation.
Thank you, Mel. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. The first person that wishes to speak on this item is Councillor Unsworth. Councillor Unsworth, please.
Thank you. First of all, I'm really pleased to see the officers taking on board the professional report that's been done. The guy clearly knows what he's talking about, and I'm really, really pleased to see those recommendations taken on board and the new conditions added. Can I just ask for one clarification on the report on page 12? You've got the houses, the total is up to 12 houses, yet it says it's 17. Can I just ask for clarification as to what the 5 are, because it doesn't state them in the mix? Thank you.
Sorry, this is Melanie here. Whereabouts is the number 5 mentioned? Is it at the bottom of page 12?
At the bottom of page 12, if you add up the number of houses, 2 2-bedroom house, 4 3-bedroom house, 6 person, 4 affordable and 2 shared ownership becomes to 12 houses, and you say that plots for 17. What's happened to the rest?
No, this table here sets out the number of affordable houses, which is a proportion of the 17. It would be a percentage of the 17. So you've got this is David Steele's recommendation that we would have 2 2-bedroom houses and 4 3-bedroom 6-person houses, and that comes to a total of six affordable dwellings. And then between those, the tenure is then you would have then 4 at affordable rent and 2 at shared ownership, and that's what the total of 6 is. That's the affordable housing that will be secured by Section 106.
Okay, thank you.
So it's 6. So it's 6 out of the 17. Yep. So the remaining 12 will be, for want of a better word, normal housing. Market housing, that's the word. Market housing, sorry.
Market value, yeah. Okay, thank you.
The next person who wishes to speak is Councillor Mann. Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think the written report and the spoken report that we just had gives us a number of reasons why we can give our support to this application. As the application has evolved, there's been an overall reduction in the number of dwellings, 22, then 19, then 17, with 6 of them affordable, which is obviously in the right direction. The altered layout, I think, is also an improvement, giving the partial avenue of lime trees and the setting within an area of public open space. Our historic buildings consultants find no harm to the conservation area character or appearance, which is obviously a plus, and there's no general objection from the landscape officer. I think all in all it would indeed seem to be of an appropriate rural character for an edge of village location like this. So I'm happy, Chairman, to move officer's recommendation with the amended conditions that have been outlined.
I'm sorry, Councillor Manners. After you said, "Are we willing to move?" I lost you. Can you go from "we're willing to move," please?
I'm willing to move officer's recommendation together with the amended conditions that have been outlined, Chair.
And with the additional new condition as well.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Does that find a seconder before I move on, please?
Yes, Madam Chairman. Councillor Ritchie.
Councillor Ritchie, you're seconding. I've got Councillor Mrs. Parker next to speak.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you very much, Melanie, too, for a very clear presentation. And I would like to congratulate both the officers and the applicants for producing what is, I think, a good scheme. I'm very pleased that the built development is going to be to the south of the lime trees. I think this is a good layout, and very pleased to see the variety of different house types. And I think it will fit very well within the historic context of Gosfield. I would also like to thank Mr. Westover for his comments, actually, which have been so helpful. And thank you, Melanie, for picking up those points. You've actually dealt with most of the points I was going to raise, but there were a couple of other points I just would like to ask Melanie. I am a bit concerned that the root protection area for T2, which you can see on slide 3, so that's basically the first lime tree, and it's one of the surviving big lime trees. I'm concerned that the road is going to encroach on that root protection area, and I just wanted to check whether the arboricultural method statement would cover how that would be protected. I assume that I did think actually that the road could have possibly avoided that area, but there may have been a reason why it needed to come at right angles to the street. The second thing, which was I noted that there is proposal to plant a very mature, well, quite a mature lime tree to replace 2 of the trees, well, which have coppice trees which have grown up and which are in the way of the spine road. But I do think it's very, very important that that tree should be irrigated for a good period of time, otherwise it will undoubtedly die, especially as we have a summer like we seem to be getting now. So I was wondering whether that could be included in the landscape and ecological management plan at condition 13. So if Melanie could just come back to me on this point, I'd be very grateful. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. I'll ask Melanie to come back.
Hello, Councillor Parker. Yes, I can come back to you on the arboricultural method statement, which is the additional condition that's just been requested. Yes, that would cover all of the root protection areas, particularly those ones that would be affected by the driveway. From my understanding, I think the roadway has to come in straight for a certain amount of distance to meet the requirements of highways, and then it does that slight bend away from that tree, and then kind of follows down the central section between the trees. But as far as the ARB method statement, that would cover any works within any of the canopies and root protection areas of the trees. With regards the new tree and maintenance of it, looking at condition 13, I just found it on page 31. I'm just wondering if they normally have something to do with long-term management. I'm just seeing if that's in there. At condition 8. Sorry, I'm being pointed to condition 8. Yeah, so if we look at on page 29 of the agenda, members, if we look at condition 8, which is a scheme of landscaping that needs to be submitted to us to be approved, one of the criteria within that that planning condition is, if we look at the last paragraph, it talks about if a tree is damaged or diseased within 5 years of the completion of the development, then that would be replaced. But I think, does it also set out the management of them? So it doesn't set out the management, but that last paragraph would hopefully then cover if any of the trees do die for whatever reason, whether it's just through poor management or they do for whatever reason. That part of that condition, that last paragraph, would ensure that within that first 5-year period they would have to be replaced with a similar size and species. Hopefully that answers your query, Councillor Parker.
But surely if you're going to lose 5 years for the sake of putting in that we need it watered would be a good idea, because 5 years of growth could be lost if it died in the 5th year. I know it's going to be quite a substantial tree, so it is going to need a lot of water. And I just wonder if we should do something, because we don't want to lose a tree after 5 years if it's a substantial one, because you've lost 5 years of growth. And the whole idea of putting a substantial one is that we get a strong tree. I don't know if there's any wording. I'll ask Chris if there's any wording we could come up with on this, please.
Good evening, members. Just picking up that point about the condition. So, as Mel's explained, condition 8 provides for effectively the replacement of a diseased or dying tree, which is our standard wording that we'd usually put on for this sort of scale of development. If members feel strongly, we can of course amend that condition to include that provision within the wording, and potentially we can make it specific to this particular tree as opposed to the other landscaping. So obviously this would cover all soft landscaping across the actual site itself. So we could draft some additional wording to amend condition 8, and it would seem that would be the suitable place to put it. So we would actually require those details of the irrigation that would go in for that particular tree. So if members feel strongly, that's certainly something we could include. My only hesitation is that slightly deviates away from the sort of the standard condition that we would usually impose for this scale of development. Hope that helps.
Thank you, Chris. The next person wishing to speak is Councillor Abbott, and then I'll let you come back after that, Councillor Mrs. Parker. Councillor Abbott?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. Can I agree with other members in saying that officers, I think, have done a terrific job in making this a far more acceptable development. And I can't help but make the point that it is possible in sensitive locations like this to do this without causing significant ecological damage. So it's very welcome. And I'm very pleased to see the detailed comments by Mr. Westover, who I believe is an expert in this area, have been taken on board. The only other thing I wanted to add is, unfortunately, another one for Chris Padgey, condition 11 on lighting repeats the same wrong wording. I raised this at the last meeting. I won't repeat the wording, but if we could just insert the more appropriate wording that I read out last time, that would be very welcome. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. I think you realise we're working under difficult times at the moment, and these wordings are obviously a bit set in stone and going to be changed. Councillor Parker, you don't want to come back now because I raised the point you were going to raise. So does anyone else? You do.
Sorry, yes, so just very quickly, just following Mr. Padgey, I actually would like to add an extra wording to condition 8 specifically for this one tree, because it will be a very important tree within this avenue, if that would be all right.
Yes, Councillor Mr. Padgey has agreed. Does anyone else wish to make any comments on this application? I can see no one. Well, it has been moved and seconded. It has been moved by Councillor Mann, seconded by Councillor Ritchie, with the trigger for conditions 12 and 13, change it to prior to commencement, and an additional condition on the method statement, and an additional adding to condition 8 to keep the tree well watered, and to change the lighting wording. With all that changed, can I now go to the vote, please? Can you just say if you are for or against? Councillor Abbott?
For.
Councillor Bowers?
For.
Councillor Cunningham?
For.
Councillor Horner?
For.
Councillor Johnson?
For.
Councillor Mann?
For.
Councillor Monday,
4.
Councillor Mrs. Parker,
4.
Councillor Ritchie,
4.
Councillor Mrs. Spray,
4.
Councillor Unsworth,
4.
Councillor Wrench.
4.
Thank you, members. That was a unanimous vote. That application has been granted. We'll now move on to the next application, which is the application 1901744 full, land opposite Jaspers Green, Shalford. And I do have statements on this application as well. And I'm going to ask Jessica to read the statements. The first statement is from Jasper Green residents, and we have agreed to allow them up to 6 minutes, but I understand it probably won't take that long. Basically, otherwise we're going to have 2 separate statements. So, Jessica, are you ready to read this statement from the Jasper Green residents, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Jessica.
Okay. Jasper Green residents. These views are representative of the owners, occupants of a minimum of 20 properties in the hamlet. Braintree Council has already refused an application for one dwelling on this land in March 2018, and the Parish Council have stated that this is overdevelopment of the site. The Inspectorate on Appeal took the view that one dwelling only could be in keeping with the character of the hamlet. The current application is now for 3 houses when the site is only marginally larger. Why? It should also be noted that 3 houses would represent a 10% increase in housing in Jaspers Green, and these are all squashed into an inadequate space. The garden of the granary, Grade 2 listed building, would be completely overlooked by 8 windows very near its boundary. This would be extremely overbearing and would severely negatively impact on the private amenity space that is the garden for this property, taking away all its privacy. Why is this fact constantly being ignored by the developer and planning department? It is a clear contravention of Braintree Planning Policy RLP 90 8.13. Braintree has most of its housing stock, 4.92, in more sustainable areas. 3 houses would not have any material impact on this shortfall. Why spoil a small country hamlet which would affect the well-being of so many residents with an overbearing and unwelcome development? The granary, the forge, Weston's Farm, Bindu, St Andrews and the Old Place will be severely affected by the noise, total loss of privacy and disruption this development would bring. Other residents do not want to see the character of Jaspers Green change so much that with the total overdevelopment of what has always been a paddock green in the centre of the hamlet. Whilst highways have not objected outright, they have only agreed subject to certain provisions, namely an entrance of 5.5 metres width, which runs for 6 metres from the road edge. This width would take it beyond the entrance to the granary and field access. We do not, therefore, believe this is achievable without infringing on the verge, which is outside the development site. This is most definitely not achievable without removing at least 1 tree from the verge, which contravenes Braintree District Council's own landscaping report. They also confirm that there is not sufficient space at the site for the developer to provide the soft landscaping and screening they have outlined in their planning proposal. The trees and the verge and drain in front of the site are not part of the plot, and if this proposal were to go ahead, this area should be preserved. There is part of an old fence line still existing that demarks the front boundary of the plot. The boundary line must be strictly adhered to and rigorously enforced. As there is no allocated visitor parking, parking on the verge or roadside must be prevented. The site is very close to a blind bend and traffic speeds often exceed the 30 miles per hour limit. Parking on the road adjacent to the site will cause a severe accident risk. The vehicular access to the granary and the fields beyond are in constant use and cannot be compromised at any point either during development, should it go ahead, or on completion. Vehicles parked on the roadside are a further hazard in this regard. Issues surrounding wildlife, heating, sewerage, presumably space-taking septic tanks, noise, light pollution and drainage of the site and overflow draining from Weston's Farm Pond, which has previously been raised, have not been addressed. This is not a sustainable area or development. There are no shops, GP surgeries, mains drainage or gas supply. Schools are not accessible on foot. There are no pavements or street lighting. The bus service is woefully inadequate and does not run at all at the weekend. All residents in Jaspers Green rely on private cars to reach all amenities. The proposal was therefore contrary to the objectives of local and national policy to secure sustainable patterns of development. Highway suggests that a residential travel information pack be left in each property. It would not be a very big pack. The fact remains that development in this location would undoubtedly place reliance upon travel by car, as said BDC 29th of March 2018, contrary to planning policy RLP2. In summary, none of the objections to development on this site have been addressed, and they have in fact been systematically ignored. Thank you, Chairman. That is the end of that statement.
Thank you, Jessica, and thank you to the residents of Jasper Green for submitting such a statement. That I have no other statements on this application, so I go to the presentation. This presentation is also going to be presented by Mel. Thank you, Mel.
Hello again, members. Just in the process of sharing my screen. I'll wait a while, I'm not sure how long it takes. So the application before you this evening is for the construction of 3 dwellings, along with ancillary vehicle access, parking, landscaping and other associated works. And this is land opposite Jaspers Green, Shalford, Essex. Slide 2 shows you the application site in relation to the rest of Jaspers Green. This is the application site here. To the front, which you'll see in some later photographs, is an area of grassland with some trees. This side of the site, there's a property called the Stables, and then you've got the converted barn, which is listed at the back here, which is known as the granary. And then to the front here is a property called the Forge. And then you've got a number of residential properties on the other side of the road. Moving on to slide 3, this is the block plan of the existing site. So you can see that to the left-hand side of the site is an existing double garage, which will be removed to make way for the development. You can see the area of land I was referring to at the front of the site that doesn't sit within the application site but does contain a number of trees. And you can also see along the southern boundary of the site a number of trees also. The next slide, number 4, this is actually the block plan which was for the appeal that was allowed last year. For application 1800592, the inspector granted outline planning permission for just the 1 dwelling on this site. As you'll probably notice, the site is smaller than the current application site, and the approximate distance between this point and here is about 34 metres. Moving on to slide 5. This shows in detail what's proposed under this current application, which is a detached house and a pair of semis. And the width of the site, which has increased since the previous application that was allowed on appeal, is approximately 57 metres wide. And that goes from approximately here across to where the tree is. The next slide, number 6, shows the indicative layout that was allowed on appeal, which was 1 detached house and a detached garage. But as you can see, this area in blue, which is currently included within the application site, wasn't included as part of the outline application. The next few slides show you details of the proposed dwellings. So these are the floor plans for plot 1, which is the detached house. Slide 8 shows the front elevation and one of the side elevations of the property. As set out in the officer report, the officers and applicant have worked together over a period of time to improve the development of the site so that it would sit more comfortably within the hamlet and the existing street scene. So there has been some work put in to create some variety in the house types so that they sit within the varied street scene that already exists in Jaspers Green. Slide 9 shows you the rear elevation of the detached house and the other side elevation. Slide 10 shows you the floor areas of the two pairs of the pair of houses. So they're 2 3-bedrooms, as you can see on the first floor, and they've got open plan living in one of them, slightly less open plan in the second house. Plot 11 shows you the front elevation of the pair and the side that would be seen from the western elevation, which is this sliding roof that comes down to single-storey eaves. Slide 12 shows the other side elevation and the rear elevation of the pair of houses. The next few slides are photographs of the site. So this first slide shows 2 photographs taken from the road. So in both of them you can see the area of land that sits outside the application site. So it's in front of this the fence and contains trees. That falls outside the application site, so those trees will remain. And just through the trees you can just make out a close bordered fence at the back of the site, and that's the rear boundary of the application site. So in both photographs there's an area of grass in the centre of the photographs, and that's the application site. Moving on to slide 14. This property here is the stables, which sits to the west of the application site, and then this is the double garage that will be removed. You can just make out here on the right-hand side of the photograph. This is where the proposed access will come in off of the road. On slide 15 now. Again, this is a slightly different view across the site. Again, you can make out the land to the front that contains trees, the application site, and then the close bordered fence that runs along the southern boundary of the site. Turning to slide 16, this is a view of the road to the front of the application site, and the property you can just make out here. The white property is Forge Cottage, and then the application site sits behind this area of grass. This is looking up towards the centre of Jaspers Green. This is a photograph on slide 17. I'm standing inside the site, looking to the southeast, and this is the property that's been spoken about in terms of the granary. This is the listed barn, so that is just about viewable from the site. And turning to slide 18, this is the private driveway which runs off of the main road to the front of the site, runs along the boundary of the site and then forks, and as you can see, this section of the access continues on to a farm, and then where it turns around to the left-hand side, that runs down the back of the application site and serves the granary. Slide 19 shows you some distances between the rear elevations of the proposed dwellings and the southern boundary of the site. So because of the shape of the site, there is some variety, starting at 4.7 and increasing up to 10, where the site isn't rectangular, it is at an angle. And what you can see on this block plan also is this double line here is the driveway that runs up to the granary and is their vehicular access. Slide 20 is an aerial photograph of the application site. It's a bit fuzzy, but hopefully you can all see it. The application site is here. You can just about make out the roof of the garage. At the time of the aerial photograph being taken, there was a trampoline. You can also make out the grassed area with the trees to the front of the site. You can also see where the driveway comes in off of the road and then bends round and then runs down the back of the application site and then serves the granary, which is located down here. The reason I've included this within the presentation is to show that the private garden for the granary is located in this area here. And so this would be the area of land that we would be keen to protect in terms of overlooking and loss of light that our policies require us to do. And this is the piece of land that runs along the private driveway, the driveway that serves the granary and is used as garden space, but we would consider that to be more front garden amenity land. And I think we would also refer back to the appeal decision, which, as far as I understand, has been appended to the agenda. And the inspector didn't raise any issues with this relationship in terms of overlooking or loss of light. So the last page is my summary and conclusions. The site is located south of Jaspers Green in an area of countryside between Panfield and Shalford. There is a listed property located to the east and another to the north. The principle of developing the site for the construction of one dwelling was established by the allowed appeal in December 2018. Within the context of Jaspers Green and the appeal decision, which allowed for one dwelling, the development of the application site for three dwellings cannot be reasonably objected to. Officers are content that the site is sufficient in size to accommodate three dwellings. Officers are content that the proposed dwellings would maintain an acceptable relationship with all neighbouring properties, and the proposed development would therefore constitute sustainable development in the planning balance and is therefore recommended that planning permission is granted. That's the end of the presentation.
Thank you, Mel. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Councillor Abbott, you've indicated you wish to speak.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chairman. So I do have an issue with this one. The officers in the report on page 51 essentially say about 2/3 of the way down, because of the appeal decision, we couldn't substantiate a defence at appeal if this was refused. I don't really see how that follows, because that was for one house on a different size plot. This is for three houses on a plot that actually isn't that much bigger. So I would have thought what we should be doing is comparing the harms from the one scheme to the other. And the two main issues I think there are the effect on the amenity of the neighbouring residents, has it changed, and also the effect on the landscape setting. So could I ask officers what's their assessment of the change in the amenity impact, given that this is three houses, not one? Why they think that going from 1 to 3 necessarily follows when the inspector was never looking at this, and that's a fairly well treed site where they're planning to put those three houses. How much of those hedges and trees might be lost to this development? Thank you.
Thank you. Mel, do you want to come back at this stage, please?
Yep.
Or Chris? Chris is coming back, right?
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Abbott, for the question. I think I suppose the starting point for this particular application has to be the previous appeal decision. I think there's a general point here that I think on reflection after reviewing the appeal decision, I think from officers' perspective, we would certainly acknowledge this is a bad appeal decision. I think there's a question mark in terms of the interpretation of policy RLP 16 in terms of the infilling of a small gap. The inspector seems to have, within the reading of the decision, focused purely on the character of the area as opposed to the point about the breach of that policy in terms of infilling for more than one dwelling. Now, that's obviously established a fallback position in terms of the site is suitable for one dwelling, and on the indicative block plan that was submitted for that application, it shows a fairly large house, cross wing with a detached garage. It's quite clear from that plan that you could accommodate more than one dwelling on that site from that plan. So I think from our perspective, in the absence of that appeal decision, I think there would be another argument here. But reading through the appeal decision, and specifically this point around the impact of the character of the area, where in some respects the inspectors effectively turned around and said, well, that's just something for reserve matters. I think that's a disappointing conclusion to have been reached, really. However, the principle of a dwelling on that site has been accepted. So again, I think the conclusion within the report from officer's perspective is correct. It is certainly, this is an on balance one, and it is on the back of a poor appeal decision that we are effectively saying we're not sure that actually there are going to be sufficient defendable grounds here to resist a further application, because effectively the inspector hasn't in the decision turned around and said that the site could be accommodating more than one dwelling on the site, whereas clearly from the block plan that was submitted with the application, it clearly could. Given the lack of grounds around character and the fact that the inspector didn't consider this was ribbon development, this was infill, I think we're concerned that the reason for refusal would be difficult to defend. This is something that sits quite uncomfortably, because ordinarily we wouldn't be looking to support the application afresh, but it is, based on the actual appeal decision and our reading of it from that inspector. Similarly, as Mel was mentioned within the presentation, I think the inspector has concluded at the bottom of the appeal decision, so page 60 of your agenda, paragraph 16, the inspector concludes that the impact on neighbours, amongst other things, in terms of privacy, these are matters were not considered in the council's reason for refusal. As this is an outline application only, these issues can be addressed through consideration and approval of reserve matters. Now, while that strictly speaking is correct in terms of the detailed position of windows, the reality is we're looking at a relationship of a new dwelling to existing. So irrespective of where that dwelling would be sited at reserve matters, we're accepting, or the inspector was accepting of that relationship in terms of the impact. So again, we do feel fairly constrained by that particular appeal decision in this case. So absolutely, it's an unbalanced decision, and we do feel that it would be difficult to substantiate a reason for refusal, and we're not convinced that the likelihood of being able to defend that appeal would be successful. However, it is an on-balance recommendation, so obviously note the concern, Councillor Abbott, that you've raised in relation to this particular proposal, and obviously the recommendation. Hopefully that answers the question, Madam Chairman.
Councillor Abbott, I'll let you come back on this one, as you've just had a response.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I listened very carefully to what the officer said, but I simply can't find what he's saying in the inspector's letter. I've just read it again. The inspector quotes RLP 16, which talks about a single dwelling. I can't see anything in there where he speculates about further housing. He was looking at a different sized application site. In the officer's report, it clearly states that this application is contrary to RLP 16, which is a grounds for refusal. So I think what we appear to be saying is we're going to grant this because we're afraid of an appeal decision but not based on the actual appeal decision we've just had. So I'm sorry, Madam Chairman, I can't support this application.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Chairman. I have much personal sympathy with the view of the Parish Council and some of the representations. However, I take, I think, a different view from Councillor Abbott about the views of the inspector in the appeal decision. And I think they are key here. He sees the site as land that is already integral to the settlement and not as opened countryside. So he is accepting the actual principle of development on the site, which makes it, I think, difficult for us. He also says that there's an absence of harm to the setting of the several adjacent heritage sites, which I thought would usually be a consideration, but he sees no problem there. So that's another line of defence gone. There is no actual objection from Essex County Council Highways, and I reluctantly agree with the officer's conclusion that a refusal on policy conflict with the development plan would not be substantiated at a further appeal. At an appeal situation, and I have a fair experience of a number of those, we'd get this inspector's appeal decision fed back to us in toto, and I think he's left us with very few possible policy objections.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Chris Padgett would like to come back before I move on to the next speaker.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, for allowing me to just come back. I just wanted to pick up the comment from Councillor Abbott just in terms of the willingness, I suppose, to fight in a potential appeal on this. It's certainly not the case that is officers' stance. We refuse a number of applications that we consider either inappropriate, either on principle or detailed grounds, and we actively fight and robustly defend our reasons for refusal at appeal. The point, I think, from the key point from officers' perspective is, although we may disagree with that appeal decision, we have to have regard to it. And in issuing and considering this particular application, it does form a material consideration in the assessment. And it's obviously open to interpretation in terms of elements of the inspector's decision. However, I think our concern is that it narrows down substantially the areas at which we could actually reasonably raise objections and issues that we would then be able to successfully defend at appeal. So it's not through lack of willingness. As I said, we previously fought an appeal on this site for one dwelling, and that appeal was allowed. And as I said, I would certainly be critical of that particular appeal decision and the decision letter that was issued by the planning inspector. However, we can't ignore it. Even though we may disagree with it, we can't ignore that particular appeal decision, and that's the conclusion that we have come to as officers in terms of the recommendation. It isn't the lack of willingness from officers to fight a subsequent appeal.
The next person wishing to speak is Councillor Mrs. Spray. Councillor Mrs. Spray.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I don't think this is going to be the easiest decision this committee's ever had to make, and part of the problem, I would agree with Chris, is around the previous appeal. I would describe the wording in it as clunky, really, and he doesn't seem to specifically say that there isn't room for more than one dwelling on there, but he doesn't say that there is either. I don't think it's massively helpful. And there's no doubt that the principle of residential development on a site is established. That's for sure. It does look to me from, I had a good look at the drawings and the plans. It does appear to me that there is certainly room for the 3 houses that are proposed, and I appreciate that they have worked. The applicant has worked with officers to accommodate that. Highways issues which have been raised. Yes, I think Councillor Mann has already said that Highways did a site visit and they are content with it. I would just ask Mel if she wouldn't mind just a couple of points in the resident statement. I wanted to just ask her to have a look at. There's a point here that the garden of the granary would be completely overlooked by 8 windows very near its boundary, which would be extremely overbearing and severely negatively impact on the private amenity space that is the garden for that property. Could I just have a comment from her on that? And the second thing was a couple of paragraphs down from that in their statement, which was around Highways and the entrance, and sorry, bear with me. Which was around the width of the entrance, which they say we do not therefore believe this is achievable without infringing on the verge, which is outside the development site. I guess this is probably a parking issue. I'm not sure. Would Mel mind very much coming back on that, particularly the comment about the windows? Thank you.
Thank you. I think it'd be quite helpful if we could have the plan up.
Yeah, I was going to reshare my screen. So
I'm sorry, I didn't make a note of which number slide that was.
That's okay. I've committed it to memory, so I've been looking at it all day. So if you just bear with me, members, I'll share my screen again. I think probably this is the best slide with the aerial photograph, which shows the position of the application site, which is here. And then you've got, this is the granary. So that's a listed barn conversion. The private garden for that property wraps around this portion here. So this is what we would consider to be the private sitting out area, where you would spend time with family, have barbecues, whatever. And then I think the piece of land that the resident of this property is concerned about is this portion of land, which runs along the access drive, which from what I understand is used to play football on and have I think in the past it may well have had a trampoline on it, but we would consider that this would be more akin to front garden, and in terms of what our policies require us to protect, it would be more. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to move on to the next screen. I probably tapped the screen and without realising it. So this portion of the land that they own, whilst it's garden, it's front garden, it wouldn't form part of the garden that we would want to seek to protect. That would be more this portion that is much closer to the house and is directly accessed out the back of the house or out to the side. So what I'll also do is I'll go back to the elevations and the previous slide, which just showed the relationship between the rear of the proposed houses and the southern boundary. So I think this plan is quite useful. So again, you can just make out the access drive that runs along the southern boundary of the site that serves the granary. And then you've got these different distances that are marked on there. And so there are a number of windows proposed in the back of these properties. And there are varying distances between the back of those properties and the southern boundary because of the site not being completely rectangular. I'll then go up to the other slides, if you bear with me, just to show you those rear elevations. So this is the rear elevation of the pair of houses. So you've got 2 windows in plot 3 and 3 first floor windows in plot 2. They would serve, let's have a look, a bedroom, an ensuite, a bathroom, a bedroom, a bathroom, and then an ensuite bathroom. And then turning to the detached house, again, this is the rear elevation. So you've got 3 first floor windows. These are actually the furthest away from that southern boundary. So there is a depth of about 10 metres approximately from these windows to the southern boundary. And from memory, they serve 3 bedrooms. Yes, they do. So we've got the master bedroom, bedroom 5 and bedroom 4. So does that answer your query on that, Councillor Spray?
I think so. Thank you, Mel. So what we're saying is in planning terms, which is after all what we have to make decisions on, the windows referred to in their statement are not, they're not considered to be overbearing and take away from their privacy. Is that a summing up correct?
Yes, yeah. I mean, basically, it's because those windows, we acknowledge that they would overlook that area of grassland to the south of the site, but in terms of what our policies would seek to protect in terms of privacy, the private garden of the granary is located much further away from that grassed area, which I think there was some photographs sent round earlier in the week that showed a goalpost or a football net on that piece of grass. And if I just go to the screen with the aerial photograph, again, I think you can just about make out the goalposts on the grass there. But what our policies require us to really seek to protect is this private space that is located much closer to the to when you step first out of the property.
Yes, thank you. That's
the other query that you raised, which I think was their 5th bullet point. So at the bottom of page 1, where there's a mention of a planning condition, or what the requirements of a planning condition from the Highways Authority, which requires the entrance to be 5.5 metres for the first 6 metres into the site. At the moment, I'll just go back to this screen. This distance here isn't 5.5 metres wide, but I have had it confirmed by the highways officer before she made her recommendation. She did do a highways records check to ensure that the land either side of the proposed access is highway land, and so there is ample space on either side to be able to achieve that 5.5 metres. So although it's not within land that the applicant owns, it does fall within land that it is highway land.
That's fine. Thank you very much.
Okay.
That sorts that out. I think, Madam Chairman, I say this is, I think it's not the easiest, but given the explanations that I've heard and taking everything into account, I will move officer's recommendation for approval, please. I'm not, it's not the happiest thing to have to do, but I think all in all, it does meet with our policies. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Spray. Does it find a seconder before I move on?
Seconded, Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. I've now got Councillor Mrs. Parker wishes to speak.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I agree with what's been said, in particular. I mean, ordinarily, we would not seek to grant planning permission on this site. It's not in a sustainable location. It's in the countryside, not within a village envelope. And most particularly, policy RLP 16, which is the infill policy for hamlets, does not apply because the plot's too large. But obviously, we have this appeal decision. And also, we are in tilted balance territory where we have to weigh up the adverse and the adverse impacts must significantly and demonstrably, I think that's the phrase, outweigh the benefits. And I think given the findings in the appeal decision, it's very difficult for us to with the residents, but I do feel that on balance, unfortunately, we would not. We do have to follow the advice of the inspectors in his appeal decision. The other point I wanted to make really was that, of course, we have that appeal decision. There is a fallback position for one house on that original site. and we then would be left with a gap which would accommodate one site, one house. So it would be perfectly possible for the applicant to come back with a second planning application for another dwelling on that plot. And it seems to me really that in those circumstances, it's better to try and work with the situation we have to make the best possible and to come up with a good design, which I do think the officers have achieved. So it is with reluctance, actually, that I also would support this application.
Councillor Ms. Parker, you are breaking up terribly. Can I suggest that you put your video camera off to make things, see if that improves it? Please.
Is that better, Councillor Scattergood?
Yes, that's a bit better, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, you were breaking up terribly, so that's much better. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to say thank you for the information about overlooking for that concern. The only other point I want to...
No, you're breaking up again, Councillor.
Shall I carry on?
Hello.
I just wanted to make a point about the construction vehicles and whether we could add a condition that they should not park on the road.
Would that be possible?
Hello, Councillor. Oh, sorry. Can I come? Okay. I'm going to come back on that one. If we just refer to page 55, we have got a condition suggested at the moment, which is to do with a mud control management scheme. I'm just wondering whether if members are happy to have that condition amended so that it becomes a more standard construction management condition that will include the mud control and also have some details as to where construction vehicles will park. Because having agree with Councillor Parker, having visited the site on a few occasions, we wouldn't want to have construction vehicles. We wouldn't want to have construction vehicles parked on the road. So if members were happy with that suggestion, I think condition 12 even could quite easily be adapted to include that.
I'd be happy with that, Chairman, since I moved it. I'd be more than happy to support that change.
Thank you. Councillor Cunningham, as you seconded it, would you be happy with it?
Yes, if officers deem appropriate. It seems a little disproportionate from my point of view, but nevertheless, if officers felt it was proportionate, happy to agree to move things on.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Unsworth.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I've looked at the original plan here, and it seems to me that the original house was applied for on a different site, a different scale, a different size, probably to establish the planning principle and development here, and then it didn't meet all of the criteria. It doesn't overlook the houses, doesn't overlook the neighbours, and so I'm not really surprised it was thrown out on appeal, to be quite frank. This is a different house on a different plot, and so I can't support this at all. It is completely different. I think it's totally different. It's different size, different plot, different development, overlooks a different way. And I'm having heard what's been said, I can't support this at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Does anyone else wish to add anything new or further to this application? Oh, thank you, Councillor. Thank you. Chris Padgey wishes to come in. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Sorry, I just wanted to just pick up the last comment from Councillor Unsworth. Acknowledge the point about the plot. I think that the key point from officers' perspective, just to be clear, is looking at the red line application sites that was submitted with that original application that we as the local planning authority refused that was allowed at appeal, is clearly capable of accommodating more than one dwelling. So I acknowledge the point being made. However, I think that the issue for us is still that there was a breach there in terms of RLP 16, and we have not been able to defend that successfully at appeal. So I acknowledge the point. However, that plan that was originally submitted, the indicative plan, clearly is capable of accommodating more than one dwelling. Certainly 2 detached dwellings, arguably 3 in some form of configuration. So I just wanted to provide that clarification, Madam Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed, Chris. Well, members, I haven't any indications that anyone else wishes to speak, so I'm going to put it to vote. It has been moved by Councillor Mrs. Spray, seconded by Councillor Cunningham, with an additional condition 12 on the working condition. All those in, I'm going to go through the vote. Councillor Abbott.
Against.
Councillor Bowers.
For.
Councillor Cunningham.
For.
Councillor Horner.
For.
Councillor Johnson.
For.
Councillor Mann. Councillor Mann.
Sorry, Chairman. Against.
Councillor Monday.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Parker.
For.
Councillor Ritchie.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Spray.
For.
Councillor Unsworth.
Against.
Councillor Wrench. Councillor Wrench.
Sorry.
For. Okay, thank you, Councillor. That application has been granted, members. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. That now brings us to the application 1902095/VAR. This is the Great Lodge. Oh no, it's the Garden Field lands south of Western Road, Silver End, and I do have a statement on this application, and the statement is from Mr. Ken MacDonald, and it was going to be read by Jessica. Jessica, can you read the statement from Mr. MacDonald for me, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Okay. To whom it may concern, please note that this is not an objection, but an observation regarding the above proposed variation of Condition 2 of Permission 18/00442 out. I bring to your attention the wording stated on page 68 of the agenda in the first paragraph under highways issues. It states the amended access would ensure that, if approaching from the east, the refuse vehicle can wait to enter the site without overhanging the east and westbound running lanes on Western Road. If a vehicle was travelling from the east, then it would directly enter this site by turning left. It should read approaching from the west. I also note that stated in the same paragraph, the applicant says that the manoeuvre from the garden fields to the Red Row homes access is achievable with a refuse vehicle, and notes that this would not be a common manoeuvre. This statement is probably correct, as the refuse vehicle would visit the Red Row estate first before entering the garden fields site. This would mean crossing Western Road only once when exiting the Red Row site, rather than visiting the garden fields, first necessitating Western Road to be traversed 3 times. Again, I bring your attention to the Waterman drawing number 015 Rev A04 titled Proposed Access Egress with Approved Red Row Access Auto Tracking Manoeuvres, which only details access to this future development from a westerly direction. What about the egress? As this drawing will ultimately be signed off by a chartered responsible person, who will then be legally responsible for the details shown, the drawing title does not describe properly the subject matter displayed on this drawing. As I stated in my previous observation, I consider that detailed drawings should be produced to show a comprehensive refuse movement tracking on this part of the highway network for all routes eventualities, including drawings showing the access egress between the Garden Fields Red Row sites. I hope that questions regarding my concerns are asked and that answers are offered. Thank you for taking the time to read these comments, also for the opportunity to have them aired. And that is the end of the statement, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. And can I thank Mr. Ken MacDonald for submitting this statement? Now come to the presentation. The presentation is going to be made by Lisa. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Bear with me one moment. Thank you. Okay, this is a Section 73 application to vary Condition 2 relating to approved plans on 18/00442 OUT, which granted outline consent for up to 45 dwellings with associated development. The variation would allow for the repositioning of the access point, and the site is the Garden Fields, land south of Western Road in Silver End. Slide 1 here is a location plan. So the site comprises an area of paddocks south of Western Road, which is approximately 2.6 hectares in area. Existing residential properties lie to the west. Immediately opposite the site is the Redrow Homes development, where 350 homes are being built. To the south is a public right-of-way, providing access to an open space and lake to the east. Slide 2 here shows the proposed access location. So as I've said, the application proposes to vary the plans approved under Condition 2 pursuant to the outline permission. The effect of the variation would be to relocate the access approximately 1.5 metres eastwards of the approved alignment. Slide 3 is a proposed access tracking, and as has been noted, this shows the vehicle tracking as you're entering the site from the west, not the east. So here you can see the proposed traffic island that will come forward by the Redrow development. The proposal is to move the access further to the east to allow for improved turning of large vehicles into the site. Looking at some photographs now, here is slide 4, which shows the view from the northern side of Western Road, looking to the site. Looking south to the site, sorry. Slide 4 is a view from the northern side of Western Road, looking east towards the site. And there on the left-hand side, you can see the Redrow site. Slide 5 is just a view standing from Western Road, looking into the development site. Slide 6 is a view from the southern side of Western Road looking east, and again you can see the access to the Redrow development, and that development is advancing. Slide 8 is just another view from Western Road. It's a view from the southern side of Western Road looking west, so sort of back in towards town. Slide 9 now sort of just covers the main matters for consideration. So as members will have read in the report, the principle of the development has been established under the extant outline planning permission, and this remains a key material consideration. The main issues of this application relate to highway impacts and neighbouring amenity impacts. So turning firstly to the highway impacts, the application or the applicant has stated that the access is required to better accommodate the turning movements of large vehicles, specifically refuse collection vehicles, to take into account of that Redrow access and the traffic island we saw in the earlier plan. So this amended access would ensure that the refuse vehicle can wait to enter the site without overhanging the lanes on Western Road, and thus reducing any potential conflict with passing traffic. The comments raised in the question time are noted in terms of sort of the correction in terms of it's to improve movements from vehicles coming from the west. Highway Authority have reviewed the application, all the submission details, and have no objections. And equally, Braintree District Council Waste Services have reviewed the application and raised no objections. It's therefore considered that in comparison to the original permission, there are no additional or detrimental highway safety impacts that would arise. And just briefly, in terms of neighbour amenity, officers are content that there would be no new impacts, and indeed the access would be further away from the closest neighbour to the west than previously approved. So slide 10, turning to the summary and the main planning balance and conclusion. No additional harm arises from this proposal to vary the location of the access in comparison to the originally approved extant permission. Due to the absence of adverse impacts, the planning balance remains as per the previous consent, and in fact is more positively tipped in favour of the proposal due to the fact that the tilted balance is now applied. It is therefore recommended that, subject to the applicant entering into a deed of variation to ensure the Section 106 commitments secured under the outline consent are transferred to this varied consent, that permission be granted subject to conditions and reasons as set out. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Lisa. Councillor Abbott, you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. As one of the two ward members for Silver End, this site and the larger Redrow site opposite have been the subject of much contention. I appreciate its history now. They've both got planning permission, one's being built. But we do note that this was nearly 400 houses added onto the edge of a village on unallocated sites. And you can imagine that was a huge cause of concern. But as I say, we are where we are. And my concern with this is not so much the access itself, it's the juxtaposition of this access with the Redrow site. And again, I appreciate county haven't objected to this, so I'm really just using this opportunity to flag this issue. Actually, what this has done has moved this access slightly closer to the Redrow turn. So although county have agreed that the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit for Silver End should be moved further out, it remains the case that traffic comes in very fast along Western Road. I mean, I'd invite anyone to have a look at, there's a website you can look at called Crash Map, which you can look back over years to see reported incidents. So these are injury incidents, slight, moderate, serious, etc. And Western Road is notorious due to its layout for these crashes. So I hope I'm wrong, but I think moving this access slightly closer to the Redrow access, and in the absence of mitigation in terms of hard speed reduction measures on the approach to the village is a recipe for heightened danger. The other point I wanted to raise, Madam Chairman, is will the REM application, could officers answer this, include a lighting condition? Our policy RLP 65 is referred to on page 65, ironically, but I can't see a lighting condition attached to the outline consent. Now, this site is right next to the gravel pits at Silver End, which are a known bat habitat. And indeed, on the Redrow site opposite, the ecology company that did the ecology surveys there found that there were bats present. So I would assume that there should be a lighting condition attached to whatever is the final consent for this site. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. Do you want to come back?
Thank you. To come back to those points Councillor Abbott's made in terms of the highway comment. Firstly, you're right in terms of the main reasoning for the change to the access to be located further east is to accommodate those sort of larger vehicles that are accessing the site from the west. But the associated impact is that that access will be closer to the Redrow site, the Redrow access by 1.5 metres. Excuse me. Yes, so the Highway Authority have reviewed all the submission and are content that there would not be highway safety concerns and that the proposal would be fully implementable. So from that highway safety concern that's been raised, that's not something that officers would share. In terms of the second point that Councillor Abbott raised in terms of lighting and a request potentially for that to be in a reserve matter condition, is that actually it could be imposed on this outline, this variation application. So if that was a requirement or request, then we could add that on as a condition here. Thank you.
Well, yes, please, because this is known locally and has been identified in professional ecological reports as bat habitat. As I say, if you wanted to check, it's on the Redrow application just opposite. So I think a full condition, as per the wording I've been previously questioning about a lighting scheme designed to protect habitats, would be ideal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. Councillor Mrs. Spray.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I note that on page 68 of our agenda, under highways issues, the wording, this is essentially a betterment which the applicant has sought to provide, as we know, not one that highway authorities have insisted upon. Highways are happy with it. It sounds acceptable to me. I think we've probably satisfactorily answered the queries put forward by as Mr. McDonald, I think, who submitted a statement. So I'm happy to move officer's recommendation for approval and strongly support the lighting condition. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Does it find a seconder, please?
Seconded, Madam Chairman.
Who was that? Is it Councillor Cunningham?
Councillor Cunningham, yes, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Does anyone else wish to add anything further? Well, members, it has been moved and seconded that we grant this variation with the additional lighting condition. Can I put this now to the vote, please? Councillor Abbott.
Abstain.
Councillor Bowers.
For.
Councillor Cunningham.
For.
Councillor Horner.
For.
Councillor Johnson.
For.
Councillor Mann.
For.
Councillor Monday.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Parker.
For.
Councillor Ritchie.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Spray.
For.
Councillor Unsworth.
For.
Councillor Wrench.
For.
Thank you very much, members. That application has been granted with the additional lighting condition. We now move on to application 1902249 full. Medlars Blake End, Great Sailing, Essex. I have no statements on this application and it's going to be presented by Lisa. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you. This is a full application for the erection of a 2-storey, 3-bedroom dwelling house at Medlars Blake End. Slide 2 here is the location plan. This site is located within the settlement of Blake End. It lies to the western side of Bardfield Road and to the north of the junction with the B1256. It's located within a group of dwellings that are set back but front onto Bardfield Road. Slide 3 here, just turn to look at some of the photographs. So on the right hand side of your screen you can see the with the gable, the rendered gable. That's sort of the host, the neighbouring site to our application, because our application refers here to the triple detached garage that is currently in association with this dwelling. Of note on this particular photograph are sort of the 2 access points. So currently this dwelling and its garage are served by 2 access points. This one here to the south, and this is the northern access point. Photograph 4 is just another view of the site, so you can just see the detached garage here that forms our application, and this is the access that would be served by this development. So probably perhaps a bit clearer here on the site plan. So slide 5 shows the proposed site plan. The application in essence seeks to demolish the existing triple garage with the erection of a detached 2-storey dwelling. This existing southern access would be utilised to access the new dwelling, so this left-hand side one as you view this plan, whereas this existing access here to the right-hand side, or the northern access, would be retained for the existing property of Medlars. Slide 6 are the existing elevations. You can see the proximity and scale of the detached triple garage in relation to the host dwelling. The existing floor plans here, really again just to show the proximity and the size of the garage in relation to the existing dwelling. So slide 8 is some proposed elevations, specifically looking at the elevation to the road. So here is on the right hand side here is the existing dwelling that we saw with the rendered front gable. Here to the left hand side is the proposed dwelling, and you can see sort of the size and scale of that. Slide 9, some more details of the proposed elevations. This shows the rear elevation and the flank. Materials for this proposed dwellings are to be brick and render with a tiled roof, and officers are content that that would be in keeping with the locality. Slide 10 now shows the proposed floor plans. So you can see at the ground floor level, there's a lounge, dining kitchen with a utility and small study, and the property would also benefit from an integral garage. At first floor, there would be 3 bedrooms with ensuite and bathroom. So slide 11, looking at the summary and the planning balance. The site is located outside of a town or village envelope, and therefore it is within the countryside. However, in terms of the NPPF and sustainability, officers consider that the development would provide some limited social and economic benefits in support of the application. The dwelling would not be detrimental to the landscape character of the area, and there would be no adverse impact to neighbours. However, the development would give rise to harm in terms of highway safety, in terms of not securing adequate visibility displays. So as already noted in the presentation, the proposed dwelling would be served by the existing southern access, with the existing northern access retained for the existing dwelling. So whilst it is acknowledged by officers that 2 access points are already in existing, forming this in-out access arrangement, any intensification of the access must be designed and constructed in accordance with current standards. Officers, in conjunction with the Highway Authority, consider that visibility in this location is restricted due to the alignment of the road, and have requested to the applicant and the agent a request for a speed survey to be undertaken to demonstrate whether reduced visibility displays could be appropriate. But this speed survey has not been forthcoming, and therefore there is an objection on highway safety grounds. As such, it is considered that the adverse impacts of granting permission would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits when assessed against the policies in this framework taken as a whole, and therefore officers recommend to members that planning permission is refused for the proposed development. Thank you, and that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Councillor Mann, you wish to speak?
Thank you, Chairman. I think this is a more simple decision than some we've had tonight. Clearly, if there are inadequate visibility displays, this falls simply on highways safety. Another application with different displays might come forward with a different recommendation, but as it stands, move officer's recommendation, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Does it find a seconder?
Councillor Abbott, yes.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. Does anyone else wish to speak? I have no other indication that anyone else wishes to speak on this item, and it has been moved by Councillor Mann and seconded by Councillor Abbott that we refuse this application. I'm now going to put that to the vote. Councillor Abbott?
For.
Councillor Bowers?
For.
Councillor Cunningham?
For.
Councillor Horner?
For.
Councillor Johnson?
For.
Councillor Mann?
For.
Councillor Monday?
For.
Councillor Mrs Parker?
For.
Councillor Ritchie?
For.
Councillor Mrs Spray?
For.
Councillor Unsworth?
For.
Councillor Wrench?
For.
Thank you, members. That was unanimous. That application has been refused. It now brings us on to the application 20000281 full. This is at the Discovery Centre, Great Notley Garden Village, and I do have a statement on this application which is going to be read by Jessica, and it's from Mr. Nick McLaren. He is the agent. Jessica, are you there?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'll start with the statement.
Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This statement of support is from Nick McLaren of Servicing Standards Limited, the planning agent acting on behalf of the applicant, Braintree District Council. This application refers to the refurbishment and replacement of the existing lighting to the artificial sports pitches at the Discovery Centre within Great Notley Country Park. The pitches are a well-used sporting facility within the park for the people of Great Notley, Braintree and surrounding areas. Last year, the football pitch was refurbished, which included replacing the original carpet with a new 3G surface, primarily for football use. The Macadam Court offers tennis and netball use. This planning application for the refurbishment of the lighting is a continuation of the refurbishment project. The existing lighting has had several failures recently, and the existing fittings are now unavailable for purchase. The original planning application from 2008 included a condition that stated no alteration to the approved mounting arrangements, mounting angles, change of luminaire type or output rating will be permitted without the written consent of the local planning authority. Therefore, this planning application seeks the approval to change the existing metal halide luminaires to LED luminaires. New lighting technology, and in particular LEDs, offer many benefits over the existing luminaires, with better colour rendering, more precise control of light spillage, longer lifespan and a reduction in energy usage whilst given the same light output. The energy required to illuminate the football pitch will be reduced by 50% and the Macadam multi-use games area will be reduced by 25%. The light spillage plans demonstrate that the spillage is slightly improved compared with the existing arrangement. The colour temperature of the light is slightly lower from 4500 Kelvin of the existing lighting to 4000 Kelvin. The higher the number, the whiter and bluer the colour, and the lower the number, the softer and yellower the colour. The design makes use of the existing columns and therefore the mounting height will not be increased or altered. The refurbishment has been carefully designed and meets the requirements of the Institute of Lighting Professionals Guidance Note for the Reduction of Obtrusive Light 2020. Thank you, Chairman. That is the end of the statement.
Thank you very much indeed, Jessica. And can I thank Mr. McLaren for sending in his statement. This application is also going to be presented by Lisa. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you. This is a full application, as we've heard, for the replacement of metal luminaires to LED luminaires to the existing floodlighting pitches so the artificial turf pitch and the multi-use games area, or MUGA, at the Discovery Centre, Great Notley Garden Village, London Road, Great Notley. The application's been reported to committee in accordance with the council scheme of delegation, as the applicant is Braintree District Council. Slide 2 here is the location plan. So the site is located towards the north of the country park, consists of an existing 3G artificial synthetic pitch, which measures 61 metres by 43 metres, and this is to the left-hand side as you view the slide, as well as a multi-use games area, or MUGA, measuring 19 by 43 metres, so the smaller pitch here to the right-hand side. As existing, there are 8 10-metre high floodlighting columns to the edge of these pitches, and these, as we have heard, were granted under a 2008 planning application. Slide 3 here is the site location plan. So you can see the existing columns surrounding the pitches. So there's 4 to the northern side of the pitch and 4 to the south. It is noted that although there are only 8 columns, there are 12 luminaires, and this is because 4 of the columns contain 2 luminaires each. The applicant seeks permission to replace the 12 existing metal luminaires with 12 LED luminaires, and the existing columns and infrastructure will remain. The reasoning for the replacement is to provide better quality provision and energy efficiency. So turning to some photographs now. Slide 4 here is a photograph taken from the northwest of the site. You can clearly see the 4 floodlighting columns here, and slightly in the distance, 1, 2, 3, and one slightly obscured there by a tree. Slide 4 is another photograph of the site. It's taken from the west, looking across the 2 pitches with the largest 3G pitch in the foreground. And again, you can see the height and proximity of those floodlighting columns. So looking at the lighting, the proposed lighting in a bit more detail, the main pitch lighting will use the 2 module light engines with narrow beam, and the proposed luminaire is 1000 watt. Whereas the MUGA court lighting details will utilise the 3 module light engines with narrow beam, and the luminaires for these units are 1500 watt. So as we've heard, the LED luminaires replace existing luminaires, which are 2000 watt. So it's clear, therefore, that there will be a reduction between 50 and 25% in power consumption. The submission also compares the existing lighting design and spillage of the existing lighting and compares that with now proposed, and the outcome is that light spillage is tighter. Slide 8 is a summary position. So the principle of lighting to these outdoor sports pitches has already been accepted with the grant of permission through a 2018 planning application. The application seeks to replace the 12 metal luminaires with 12 LED luminaires. The supporting documentation submitted demonstrates that the development would not cause obtrusive light pollution, glare or spillage, and indeed would result in an improvement in these matters. And further, the lighting would not be unacceptably intrusive within this rural edge setting. The lighting scheme will provide better provision and better quality provision and energy efficiency, and the luminaires are designed to minimise light spillage beyond glare beyond the area which it's intended to light. The hours of use of the pitches will not differ from that already consented, and this will be secured again by way of condition. Control switches and time clocks will be installed on the flood lighting to ensure they do not remain on later than the permitted hours of operating, and this is a further improvement. Officers are equally content that it would not result in unacceptable impacts to residential neighbours in terms of light or similar, and the change to the luminaires is not considered to result in undue issues to passing vehicular traffic or pedestrians. And lastly, in regards to ecology, officers are content that the development would be acceptable and actually an improvement on the existing situation. As I have noted, the luminaires would reduce from 2000 watt as existing to 1000 watt and 1500 watt, and further would alter from 4500 K colour temperature to 4000 K, which is neutral white. Officers are therefore recommend to members that planning permission be granted subject to conditions as set out. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Lisa. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. When I read the officer report, I thought, well, this reads quite well. No upward light, reduced energy use, reduced spill. And then I looked at the technical details, and the officers just put some of them up. And I have to say, I'm now very worried. Those units that the officer showed have no directional control whatsoever. They have no cowling, no spillage control at all. And I've just looked at what the actual officer who's putting this forward has said on the website, and it says that no further control systems are needed. So I think we have a very significant problem here, because if you look at what the existing lights are, they have cowlings around them, which is a standard thing you have on floodlights. They're aimed flat to the ground, and they have a cowling around them to make sure the light is kept. Those units we saw will just shine out almost horizontally from either side unless they have cowlings. The second point is, although the colour temperature has been reduced very slightly from 4500 to 4000, the observer won't detect anything other than very bright white light. They certainly, you'd need to be going down to about 2700 to notice an amber colour, and I did actually ask officers to do that on one of the car parks in Whittam, which they did do, and you can notice the difference. But that's not the main problem we have here. The main problem we have is that the design we have just been shown will absolutely not, I can guarantee you as someone who's followed this subject for many, many years, will not do what they say it will do unless it has the full shielding and cowling in order to keep the lighting onto the pitch. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. I'm sorry to say I missed all your speech. I missed out on it. I don't know who else. Have I got anyone else who wishes to speak? I've got nothing on the chat line. No one wants to speak.
Madam Chairman, could I come back? And I mean, seriously, I mean, this isn't an issue that I don't think is sort of ultra time critical. Could I move deferral so that we could have this come back to have the details on the cowling included? Because as things stand, I can't see how we can grant this, because those units are literally completely uncontrolled. They're just a flat two-dimensional LED platform with no forms of cowling or shielding. And unless we can be shown that, it can't do what the officers said it can do. So I would like to move deferral, please.
Thank you, Councillor. Before I move anything like that, I'm going to ask Mr. Paggi if he would like to say something. Did you indicate you wish? Councillor, Mr. Paggi is going to respond first and then I'll come back to you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Abbott, for the question. If potentially members could just bear with us for a couple of minutes, if I could just discuss the matter in a little bit more detail just with Lisa quickly and just double check and reference the submitted plans, we might be able to provide some further advice on it. So if I could just request a brief adjournment, if possible, for us just to confer and actually look at the detail, if that's acceptable, Madam Chairman.
That's fine, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. The webcasting officer, please can you stop the YouTube broadcast for the duration?
Yes, that is now started again.
Thank you very much, webcasting officer. Members, we have now reconvened the meeting. The time is 21:27 by my clock. I now hand the matter back to Chairman, Councillor Mrs. Scattergood. Thank you.
Thank you, members, for your patience. I think I'm now going back to officers to accounts. I'm going to go to Chris Paggi, and he's going to decide what they've discussed, and we'll then move forward from there.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, members, for your patience on that. I've just conferred with Lisa and looked at the details afresh. The suggestion is twofold. If members are minded, in light of the concern that Councillor Abbott has raised, we could add an additional condition to the recommendation to require those details around the shielding to come forward for approval. However, I would just caveat that if members were accepting of that as an additional condition, I think post-committee we would need to double check the acceptability of that condition with the applicant to make sure we're not imposing something technically that either can't be done. So assuming that condition was acceptable, we could then issue a decision on that basis. Obviously, should members be minded to agree that amended recommendation. Alternatively, if members would prefer, obviously the application could be deferred. We will return to the applicant to require some further clarification on those points, potentially further detail, and then would return and report back to planning committee. So I think there's two options available in light of Councillor Roberts' comments. As I said, I would be reasonably comfortable that we could add an additional condition, but I think we would have to double check with the applicant beforehand. If there was an issue, we would then have to obviously bring the application back to planning committee. So that would be our advice as officers on this particular application. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Chris. Councillor Abbott, I did say I would bring you back following this discussion.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and I do apologise to members at this late hour for delaying, but I think it's important we get this right, because I am absolutely 100% confident from my knowledge that those luminaires, as shown, without cowling, will have enormous sideways overspill. I've just checked through the documents while officers were doing the same, and the technical specifications state that these lamps are capable of having louvres, which are shields, basically cowlings, attached. However, the design and access statement includes a fundamental error, and that makes me think we should defer. It states that all luminaires have a zero upward light ration. Well, that's not the correct word. The correct word is ratio. So there's an N been added. No one spotted it. Without additional accessories, not true, which is true potentially. to limit overspill. So what's happened there is whoever wrote this has confused upward light ratio with overspill. They're two different things. So I think we have a dilemma in that potentially, yes, we could go back technically and say you've got to put cowlings on, but actually the report has been written in the absence of an understanding of the difference between upward light ratio and overspill. So I think, given that this isn't time critical, we should defer so they come back with a proper design and a proper explanation of what they intend to do.
So, Councillor, are you moving that we defer it?
Yes.
Does that find a seconder before I move on?
Yes, I'll second it, Councillor Unsworth.
Thank you. Councillor Ritchie, will you wish to speak before I take the vote on that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Depending on what Chris Petty came back with, I was going to be happy to move officers' recommendations. In lieu of the fact that we can't be 100% sure about the retrofit of a cowling, and the fact that it might have to come back to committee anyway if it can't be achieved, then I'm minded not to at this moment in time, and see if any other members have any other comments first.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Unsworth, you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. Having just checked the specs quickly, the horizontal light spread is 116 degrees, given it's 180 horizontal. That's quite a lot. Is it possible just to put something fairly simple on this to say that the cowling should be the same as the existing ones? And then that would negate it, having seconded that we defer it. But would it be possible for officers to put something in there that actually just says that the cowling shall remain as it is and the light overspill shall not exceed what's already on site?
I'm going to ask Mr. Paggi to answer that question.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Unsworth, for the question. My suggestion would be that we would actually require those details to be submitted by condition rather than trying to word it in the way that you suggested. That would give us the full ability to check the spec, how they would be fitted, as opposed to effectively introducing a compliance condition. I think we'd want to actually look at the technical detail to make sure it's acceptable. As I said, from officers' perspective, I think there are two options. We could introduce a condition, but my advice would be that would require those details to be submitted, as opposed to, as I said, a compliance condition on that point.
Okay, thank you.
Well, members, it has been moved and seconded that we defer this item. I'm going to put that to the vote before we move on any further to see where we get to. Councillor Abbott.
For.
Councillor Bowers.
Against.
Councillor Cunningham. Oh.
Abstain.
Councillor Horner.
For.
Councillor Johnson.
For.
Councillor Mann.
For.
Councillor Monday.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Parker.
For.
Councillor Ritchie.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Spray.
For.
Councillor Unsworth.
For.
Councillor Wrench.
For.
Members, it has been voted that we defer this item for further information. So that's what's been agreed. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. We now move on to the application on 20-00382 Vary. I believe Councillor Cunningham has to leave at this point, does he not?
Yes, please, Chairman. Councillor Cunningham, you've declared a substantive non-pecuniary interest in this agenda item. As you are aware, we do treat that along the same lines as a DPI. Therefore, we do need you to leave the meeting. However, there is still one item of business left on this agenda for this evening, which is a Part B application. So I'd be grateful if you could indicate to me that you are happy to leave the meeting and retire for the evening. And I'm sure the chairman will be happy for that because the meeting would still remain quorate. Or we can send you an email after this item is finished so you can rejoin the meeting. I would be grateful if you could confirm your preferred option, please, Councillor Cunningham.
If it's easier for the meeting to progress afterwards, I'll leave and retire for the evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you and good night, Councillor Cunningham.
Good night.
Right. Now I come back to the item. I'll just go through the number again. It's 2000382/VAR. I have no statement on this application, and it's going to be presented by Tim, and it's Block B, Braintree Enterprise Centre, 46 to 48 Enterprise Drive, Braintree. Thank you, Tim. You've had a very long wait to present this one this evening.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good evening, members. Okay, so I'm just going to share my screen with you to start with. Okay, so you should all now be seeing the presentation in full screen. So this is a variation to an existing planning permission. It's fairly minor changes, and it relates to the building or new building that's going to be known as the iConstruct building. It's located adjacent to Braintree Enterprise Centre on Enterprise Drive. It's just off Springwood Drive in Braintree. The variation I'll go through in detail, but the bulk of it really is around reorientating the access of the building. So, site location plan, the application site is outlined in red here. The existing Ignite House building is on the left or the western side here. You have Springwood Drive, and that leads into Enterprise Drive, and access to the site is from Enterprise Drive. The only other point to note is that there is a public footpath that runs to the south of the site. So a few site photographs. This is the application site in the centre of the picture. It's the car park, essentially, to Ignite House. And then on slide 4 now, just a shot taken slightly further away, looking into the application site from Enterprise Drive. The application site again is in the centre of the photograph. Another photo now looking at the edge of the application site. You see Ignite House, and we're looking back towards Springwood Drive, which is on the right-hand side of the photograph. So slide 6. This is taken from Springwood Drive itself, so the application site is on the right-hand side of the photo, and the new building is to be constructed actually on the opposite side of this building, which again is Ignite House. Again, this is taken from Springwood Drive, although it's at the junction with Enterprise Drive. So the new building would be on the left of the photo, back where you can where you can see the cars parked. It would slot in here. I mentioned the footpath earlier, so there's a footpath that runs to the rear of the site. The application site is on the right hand side of the photograph, and it includes this footpath. And then a final photo. This is actually taken standing inside the site, looking back out towards Enterprise Drive. So Ignite House is on the left, and then on the far left side of that is Springwood Drive. So just a existing site plan. So that last photo was taken about where my cursor is now, looking in this direction. Ignite House on the left here, other existing units on the right. That footpath is at the southern boundary of the site here, and Enterprise Drive to the north. This is the previously approved site plan, which was granted planning consent. I think it was back in September. You can see the new building here. And essentially the change that they're really proposing is at the moment, the main access to the building is actually here, almost at the back of the building. And that was to do really with this link that was to come through to the footpath. There were positives and negatives to this. The positive was it was going to give some more active surveillance to this footpath and create a really strong link through to it. The negative was it required the removal of a stretch of hedgerow here. So the new proposal is to switch this access to this side, front of the building as it were, and to dispense with this connection to the footpath. And there are a few other minor changes that are linked to that. One is that the building would be moved 2 meters further back into the site. So what I'll do now is just switch to the new proposal. So you can see it's very, very similar, but we're just talking about really moving this 2 meters back into the site. You can see the link to the footpath is now gone. The amenity area to the rear of the building remains. It's quite a nice sort of decked amenity area here. That would remain, but the main access would now be at the front of the building here. There are some other minor changes, the loss of some roof lights. I think it's a reduction of 2 or 3, it's fairly minor. And the reduction in glazing in the side of the building, again, fairly minor. And then there's a new footpath link, some steps that will come down here, and also a route in here from this side. So really, it's all arranged around gaining access from the opposite side of the building now. The amenity space details that I mentioned, just a zoomed in plan, so you can see where my cursor is now is the decked area, and then the link through is now dispensed with, as I said. So slide 14, these floor plans are just a refresher really. They are identical to the previously approved scheme. The only difference is this central corridor, the access point has been switched to the opposite end. So the use of the building would remain exactly the same. It's the Innovation, Training and Research and Development Centre for the construction industry. And the idea is to showcase new sustainable technology, to bring that into the construction industry, and to have essentially a forum, if you like, where key figures in the construction industry can be trained in the use of new technologies. And the idea is to try and roll new technologies out in the construction sector. First floor plan, again, it's exactly the same. It's all around seminar rooms, research and development, and some office space that's linked to that. At 16, roof plan, again, largely almost identical, just a few less roof lights. Elevations, exactly the same, almost identical. I think there's slightly less of these vertical glazing panels in the building, and obviously the entrance point has been switched, as I said, to the opposite side of the building. And this now is the rear of the building, which is previously the front. Okay, so that was slide 18. So in summary, the applicant proposes minor amendments to a previously approved development. These are to facilitate the reorientation of the building's entrance. It's not considered that any of the changes are objectionable. And as a whole, the iConstruct building would still bring a significant contribution to innovation in the construction sector. It would have the ability to have real environmental benefits in terms of streamlining the construction process, promoting the most sustainable technology, techniques and materials to the industry. And then finally, there is the same Section 106 contribution as is attached to the existing permission, and this is a financial contribution towards improvements at the Springwood Drive Rain Road roundabout, and this is identical to the contribution that was requested last time round back in September. And that's the end of the presentation. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed, Tim. I have Councillor Mann that wishes to speak. Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. All I see here is minor revisions to a permission we've already given. I see nothing objectionable at all, so I'm happy to move officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor. Does it find a seconder before I move on?
Councillor Ritchie.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Ritchie, you have indicated you'd like to speak. Would you like to speak now, please?
Yes, please, Madam Chairman. Just to add that actually I think this makes it slightly clearer, and entrance-wise a little bit more focused. So more than happy to second officer's recommendations to the amendment.
Thank you very much. Councillor Abbott.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. Just briefly, yes, I too support these changes. I think they're very sensible. And for the second time this evening, happy to say it does show what can be done. So if you remember when this came before us before, I was very concerned about the unnecessary loss of the hedge. The hedge is now staying. So that keeps me happy for one. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. I'm so pleased to think that Councillor Abbott's happy tonight. Thank you. Well, it has been moved and seconded that we grant this application. All those in favour of granting the variation, sorry. All those in favour. I will put to the vote. Councillor Abbott.
For.
Councillor Bowers.
For.
Councillor Canning. Oh, it's Councillor Canning is not here, sorry. Councillor Horner.
For.
Councillor Johnson.
For.
Councillor Mann. Councillor Monday.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Parker.
For.
Councillor Ritchie.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Spray.
For.
Councillor Unsworth.
For.
And Councillor Wrench.
For.
Thank you, members. That application has been granted. That now brings us to the final application this evening, which is the Part B application, which I need to find. It's application 1901971HH, replacement of existing windows, 41 Francis Way, Silver End, Essex. Chris is going to give us a very, very quick presentation on this one.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just bear with me when I share my screen. Okay, so as set out in the agenda, this is an application for replacement of windows within Silver End, which, as members will be aware, is located within a conservation area in the Article 4 direction. The application site address is 41 Francis Way. So just moving through quickly, we have the location plan before you along Francis Way and a close-up of the block plan. I've got a series of photos that show the existing front elevation of the property, to show the existing windows, the side elevation and the rear elevation. And then we have the proposed window details. So these are the replacement windows proposed. And a few photographs just showing again the specific windows that are proposed to be replaced. So from an officer's perspective, acknowledge that the application site is obviously located within the conservation area of Silver End, which is subject to the Article 4 direction. This is the reason why consent is required for the replacement windows. Officers have worked with the applicant in terms of the detail. There was a previously refused application, and this proposal now before us seeks to replicate the original Georgian style Crittall windows that would have been originally seen in the property. The existing windows were replaced in the 1950s, which are not generally considered to be in keeping. And although the detailed specification as proposed is not the optimum, is not considered to be the optimum solution, which would be the slimline steel Crittall windows, it is considered to be a viable option that's been accepted elsewhere within the conservation area and would closely replicate the original style that would have been found within the area. So it is on that basis that the application is recommended for approval. Note the points obviously being raised by the Silver End Parish Council. Again, the historic issue in terms of the conservation area guide. These applications now, at the moment, in the absence of an up-to-date guide, are being considered on a case-by-case basis with heritage advice. So from an officer perspective and from historic buildings, we're comfortable with the detailed proposal. Okay, well, that's the conclusion. Apologies, I don't know exactly what I managed to do there. So as per the recommendation in the report, application is recommended for approval this evening. Happy to answer any questions, Madam Chairman.
Mrs. Scattergood, your microphone is switched off.
Sorry. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Right. So, yes. Sorry to detain members, but I really wanted to just very briefly speak to this, and I'm pleased that the cabinet member is on the committee so she can hear this. So, in Silver End, we have a very significant problem with planning. We have a conservation area and an Article 4 direction, and we have a conservation guide that is now 21 years old, which is the same number of years I've represented Silver End. I had hair back then, that's how long ago it was. And this cabinet member and the 3 previous ones have heard me saying we must update the conservation guide. We have a situation where I can sympathise with everybody. I can sympathise with officers, I can sympathise with residents who want to make improvements to their house, and I can sympathise with the parish council who repeatedly are objecting because applications don't comply with the conservation area guide. Now, halfway down page 122, it says that the guide was published in 1999, and therefore every application should be considered on a case-by-case basis. That is a very worrying statement. It means that we are dealing with planning applications in a conservation area with an Article 4 direction on a precedent basis, not on a rules basis. And it's leading to a lot of, what's the right word, misapprehension in the village and concern that some people are getting planning permission for this, others are being refused, some people are having enforcement action, some aren't. I don't oppose this application in principle, but all the members of this committee, and especially to the cabinet member, can we please move the conservation area guide, get a new one, and so we have clarity. And that clarity must also include not just what people can't have in the village, but what they can have. We need the county council and the district council to be proactive and produce a range of products which people know they can apply to have from their house for replacements. Because currently everyone's sort of scurrying around, and it depends on how connected you are and who. I've got officers will know, I've got an elderly lady resident in the village who's just trying to change a front door and it's been refused. She doesn't know what to do. I said to the council, can you help? Can you advise her on the type of door she might have? No, they're not allowed to, they say. So I know this is a local issue and some members might think I'm over-egging it, but it really is for thousands of people in Silver End a very important issue, and I think we need to deal with it. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. Councillor Mrs. Spray.
Thank you, Chairman. I completely agree with Councillor Abbott that the Conservation Guide does need updating quite seriously. There is a movement towards this. He and I are due to meet with Chris Padgett fairly shortly. Some work has gone on in the background towards this, and we will get it underway. It's been frustrating over the last few months because there is no doubt that the virus situation has sort of brought it to a slight halt because officers have been up to their eyes dealing with other things, and I'm not making an excuse, that is a fact, but we will get it underway. I think, yes, he's absolutely right. It does need updating, and it is leading to problems for residents. I've got no doubt about that. I will move approval on this one because I think that's the right thing to do this evening, but absolutely take on board Councillor Abbott's comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Spray. Does it find a seconder before I move on, please?
It does, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Do you wish to speak?
Only to agree with both of the previous speakers.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Does anyone else wish to add anything? No? I'm going to, it's the final vote this evening. Voting just to approve this application. It has been moved by Councillor Mrs. Spray, has been seconded by Councillor Mann. Councillor Abbott.
4.
Councillor Bowers.
4.
Councillor Horner.
4.
Councillor Johnson.
4.
Councillor Mann.
4.
Councillor Monday.
4.
Councillor Mrs. Parker.
4.
Councillor Ritchie.
4.
Councillor Mrs. Spray.
4.
Councillor Unsworth.
4.
And Councillor Wrench.
4.
Thank you, members. That application has been granted unanimously. Members, that brings us to the end of our planning applications this evening. And I'd like to thank the public who have been watching us on YouTube. And I would also like to thank members and officers for your attendance. And you will shortly be asked to leave the meeting. But before you go, can I remind you, we are meeting again next week. There will be 3 on the trot, which is quite unusual. But don't forget, I think we've all got our agendas already. I haven't opened mine because I want to get tonight out the way first. So I will close the meeting at 21:56. Thank you and good night.